Mail-in voting across this country is collapsing. Several different states. We've got California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York. They're seeing serious problems. We've got voter fraud in New Jersey and West Virginia. Now, how many times have we heard journalists complain that Donald Trump was either wrong, crazy, or lying when he said that mail-in voting was going to be chaos? They're still saying it right now, to be fair. Now, Donald Trump has gone a bit over the top, saying that foreign countries are going to counterfeit the ballots, and it will be the biggest scandal of our lifetime. So perhaps he is worthy of some criticism. But I'm sorry, man. I've got way too many stories now. We had a story about a dead cat getting voter registration. I personally received a ballot at my house for someone who didn't even live here. So yes, I think now we can see that mail-in voting is, well, it's not going to work. Okay, an 11th hour change to how we handle our most serious of elections makes literally no sense. And now we're going to reap those rewards. Well, Democrats wanted it, and I'm sorry, Republicans were right to be concerned because something happened today. Don't ask me what. Maybe it's just because we've seen all these primaries, but now we're getting a wave of news about broken mail-in voting. We've got this story from CBS Sacramento. 100,000 mail-in votes went uncounted in California. We've got this story. Montclair, New Jersey, signed, sealed, undelivered thousands of ballots. How about this? Milwaukee. They say thousands of absentee ballots didn't get counted because of late delivery, missed delivery. We've got New Orleans, or the Orleans Registrar, 4,000 mail-in ballot requests, lawsuits in New York, lawsuits in Massachusetts. Meanwhile, the news just says Trump's false attacks on voting by mail. Welcome to the circus world of 2020. No matter what happens, I'm afraid that come election time, no one's going to agree on who won or why they won. There's going to be claims of voter interference. It's going to be drawn out, counting ballots, finding ballots, losing ballots. They're going to do the election. Then a week later, they're going to say we found a box of ballots in the post office. A mail carrier in West Virginia was altering ballots. Welcome to election 2020 insecurity. I don't know what's going to happen, man. It's going to get bad, though. But there is some, well, look, Steve Bannon, he used to work with Trump. He's saying, give it up, Republicans. You're going to have to roll with this one. My stance has always been you should not change the rules the very last minute. But they did. And then this is what we get. So, well, let's start with reading this first story to see what's going on in California. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's many ways you can give, but the best thing you can do is just share this video. You know why? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you the New York Times saying outright that Trump is falsely attacking, mail-in voting. And then I'm going to show you another story where they say New York is being overwhelmed by mail-in voting. The issue is not so much mail-in voting itself. The issue is the fact that we changed the rules at the last minute and just launched out all of these mail-in ballots without updating our security for a massive nationwide mail-in election. It's fine if we do absentee ballots here and there, but to just mail out all these ballots across the board, we're not prepared for this. The mainstream media will tell you these individual stories, but the op-eds from the biggest political pundits will all say the same thing. Trump is wrong because everything Trump does is wrong. If you disagree with me, stick around and watch the video. Now, if you like what I do, please consider subscribing. A lot of people watch. They don't actually subscribe, but it really does help because it tells YouTube that my channel and content are good, is good, whatever. Let's read the first story from CBS Sacramento. 100,000 mail-in votes went uncounted in California's primary. They say with the coronavirus pandemic raging, California is part of a growing number of states increasing mail-in balloting to avoid crowds at polling places. President Trump is among those questioning the integrity of vote-by-mail elections, while supporters say they are just as reliable as polling places and offer greater flexibility to voters. But while polling places include workers who can assist people who have questions about filling out ballots, a voter doesn't have support at home, and so problems can arise. I don't know what the Democrats were expecting to happen. Did they think that every person understood exactly what they would need to do and how they would need to do it? I received a mail-in ballot application, and I didn't know what I needed to fill out or why, and I didn't know why other people in my house, well, people who don't live here anymore, did get ballots. I didn't know what the time frame was, and I also didn't know if they were going to have open polling places. So I didn't fill it out. I didn't think it was a big deal because I assumed there would be in-person voting. But on the day of, the system was down. They couldn't tell me where I needed to go to vote. And I was told by some people they weren't actually going to do any in-person voting anyway. So I just said, fine, whatever. I call that, to a certain degree, being disenfranchised. Look, if I really wanted to vote in the primary, then I could have done a little bit more. But to my defense, I work nonstop all the time. And so I didn't want to sit around and say, what do I have to do to make this work? So I didn't make it work. And it didn't work, unfortunately. For other people, though, they are trying. They just don't know how. So we get stories like this. The California Secretary of State's election data obtained by the AP showed 102,428 mail-in ballots were disqualified in the state's 58 counties. About 1.5 in the nearly 7 million mail-in ballots returned. That percentage is the highest in a primary race since 2014. And the overall number is the highest in a statewide election since 2010. 2 years ago, the national average of rejected mail-in ballots in the general election was about 1.4%. And in the 2016 presidential election year was 1%, according to a U.S. Election Assistance Commission study. The most common problem by far in California was missing the deadline for the ballot to be mailed and arrive. To count in the election, ballots must be postmarked on or before Election Day and received within 3 days afterward. Statewide, 70,330 ballots missed those marks. Another 27,525 either didn't have a signature or the signature didn't match the one on record for the voter. Who is going to be most negatively impacted by this? When it comes to voting, it's going to be poor, minority, elderly voters, people who need assistance. It's going to be first-time voters, younger voters. We are going to see a level of disenfranchisement not seen in a very, very long time. So you get what's happening in California? Let's step it up. Let's go to this one. These are all from today, mind you. This is what's really crazy. Signed, sealed, undelivered. Thousands of mail-in ballots rejected for tardiness. NPR says, and mind you, this is CBS, this is NPR, this is USA Today, mainstream newspapers, all of a sudden now writing all these stories about how messed up everything is. But who are the people in mainstream media telling us that Trump was wrong, that mail-in voting was going to be fine? I'd like to see them answer for this. They say an NPR analysis has found that in the primary elections held so far this year, at least 65,000 absentee or mail-in ballots have been rejected because they arrived past the deadline, often through no fault of the voter. While the numbers are relatively small, around 1% in most states, they could prove crucial in a close election, especially one in which many more voters are expected to cast absentee and mail-in ballots to avoid going to the polls during a pandemic. Those who use mail-in voting for the first time, especially young Black and Latino voters, are more likely to have their ballots rejected because of errors, said Charles Stewart, a political scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology who studies election administration. That's the sort of thing that makes me wary about what's going to happen in November when we get an even larger influx of people who haven't voted or haven't voted by mail in the past. Boom. And there it is. Do the Democrats want Trump to win? I have to ask this, and I mean this with all sincerity, because I've been talking about it kind of a lot. It seems like everything that they do benefits Trump. How many times do I have to make a video saying Democrats do this and it backfires? Mail-in ballots are backfiring on Democrats because it's younger Black and Latino voters who are more likely to be negatively impacted by this, and they are also more likely to vote Democrat. I'm not saying that they're guaranteed to vote Democrat or that they should. I'm saying that's just a tendency. When we do the polls, that's who votes Democrat more so than Republican. I tell you what, man, y'all are in for a wild ride. Absentee ballots didn't get counted because of late delivery, post office says, in Madison. It's everywhere, dude. Do I even need to read this story for you? You get it. The U.S. Postal Service has identified hundreds of absentee ballots for the April election that never made it to voters or couldn't be counted because of postmark problems. This story's from 3 days ago. I did a Google search and I saw a story. I do the news. I prowl the news. I saw this story about 100,000 ballots being rejected. And that to me is absolutely insane and unacceptable. I mean, this is disenfranchisement at a massive scale, worse than anything the Democrats could ever complain about. These are people who didn't do anything wrong, for the most part, like we saw in the NPR story, through no fault of their own, and the ballots didn't get there on time. Why? Well, they're relying on the post office. So what are we supposed to do? Honestly, man, I don't know what to tell you, because it's in Wisconsin. Check this one out. 4,000 mail-in ballot requests sat at post office. This is where it gets really bad, because these are people who didn't even get to vote. They got their application, they filled out, they sent it in, and the post office did not deliver. This story says, New Orleans. An Orleans parish elections official is bringing problems with mail-in absentee voting to light. And Jefferson Parish voters have similar concerns ahead of Saturday's election. Both issues appear to involve the U.S. Postal Service. Orleans Registrar Sandra Wilson tells WDSU that some 4,000 applications for mail-in ballots were discovered July 1st at a New Orleans post office. She didn't know how long they'd been sitting there, but Wilson says postal workers delivered them to her office at City Hall that day. The registrar's staff worked overtime to put ballots in the mail to voters whose requests were delayed. Albert Ruiz, a regional USPS spokesman, said in an email Saturday that ballot applications in New Orleans were held at the post office because of short paid postage. The employees involved were brought up to speed on the agency's policies, which Ruiz explained in a subsequent email call for mail-in and absentee ballots to be delivered even if they don't have the correct postage. Oh, man. So you mean to tell me that people who didn't know what kind of stamps they needed didn't get their applications in time? That's ridiculous, man. Look at this. League of Women Voters sues NY State Board of Elections alleging serious flaws in absentee ballots. Who are these people in media who are claiming everything was going to be fine? I don't know. Why were they doing it? I have no idea. Did they want Donald Trump to win? I can only imagine that's the case. It's absolutely unsurprising, I guess. Look, I've done a bunch of videos on mail-in voter fraud. But now that we're getting new information on what's going on and we're learning that a lot of these rejected ballots come from Black, Latino, and youth voters, there's got to be some egg on the face for Democrats for this one. This is a complete and total backfire on all the Democrats who demanded this. In CA 25, they did mail-in ballots. And I speculated, I thought that we would see an increase in younger voters, because one of the problems that the Democrats have, they can't get the youth vote to actually turn out. Well, I speculated, if you put the ballot in their face, maybe they'll just roll with it, right? Unfortunately, no, that wasn't the case either. I can't tell you why the Democrats want to use this system other than the surface level. They're concerned about COVID. I can respect that. Maybe they thought people wouldn't turn out to vote because of COVID fears. And Moody's Analytics told us, and they're very, very accurate, that Donald Trump was going to win unless they had historic voter turnout. That in a very low turnout situation, Trump was going to win. So they're probably thinking the only way we can maintain voter turnout is to make sure people feel safe and secure, and COVID might scare them. If that's it, well, there you go. Totally fine, right? Sure. In my opinion, I think changing the rules at the 11th hour was a huge mistake. If we are not prepared for a pandemic, it is not the fault of Trump or the Democrats or anyone else, and we shouldn't change the rules because of it. The best thing we could do is change the rules at the polling stations, but the fear was the lines would be backed up and nobody would get to vote. Well, I don't know what to tell you, man. What are we supposed to do? It's an emergency. It's a crisis. We can't postpone the election. Okay, well, then we got to have the election. And if that means people have to wait in line for a long time, it's the best we can do. I don't think mail-in ballots are going to solve the problem. Not only are people being rejected, but we are going to see across the board accusations of fraud outright. Now, look at this. Minority voters sue Massachusetts over failure to send mail-in ballot applications. Based on what the Democrats claim they want to fight for, marginalized peoples, this egg on the face, man. Beyond backfiring against the Democrats. Now they're seeing lawsuits from women voters, minority voters. Now, look, I get it. I'm not saying that any of these groups owe their vote to anybody. But if this is who the Democrats are trying to help, they're not helping. They're making it worse. Now, here we go. The New York Times, Trump's false attacks on voting by mail stir broad concern. The president's assertions about widespread fraud have little or no basis in fact, but are resonating with his supporters and give him the option of raising doubts about the legitimacy of the outcome. Okay, let's stop here. Trump has brought up fraud. Trump has brought up, I guess, China, counterfeit polls. Okay, let's criticize all that. Maybe Trump went a little bit too far with it. I don't know. I don't care. What I can tell you is that trying to implement last-minute rule changes is, of course, going to result in chaos. You see, earlier today, as I'm filming this, or as I'm preparing to film this video, I made the mistake of downloading Zoom, and it broke the audio drivers for my computer, and I had to duct tape everything together. And guess what? It made me rushed, and I'm recording this literally like right before you've probably watched it. The reason I'm bringing this up is, for one, it's extremely frustrating. You can probably hear it in my voice. But two, when you try to implement a program at the very last minute, it is nothing but duct tape and chaos. And now I'm certainly reaping the benefits of this. It's just simple reality. As the Democrats, as these local governments tried to implement mail-in voting at the last minute, we don't know what the bugs are going to be. We don't know what will or won't work. We cannot just change this at the last minute. And the media just runs. It's you know what? This article is sophistry. They are trying to use circuitous, nonsensical arguments to convince you everything will be A-okay. And of course, it's Maggie Haberman. Let me show you something. June 24th, 2020. And they're ragging on Trump, saying Trump's false claims of fraud. How about your own news outlet? Vote by mail ballot requests overwhelm New York City election agency. For the biggest city in the country, a dramatic and fast expansion of the mail-in voting system has come with challenges. June 19th. Can you believe this? They wrote this story 5 days before the other one. Oh, but guess what? Nick Corasaniti and Stephanie Saul. And who wrote this one? Why, it's Nick Corasaniti, Linda Q, and Maggie Haberman. Nick, when you were putting this story together, could you not have said maybe Trump was right about this? Mail-in ballots were New York was being overwhelmed by this. And then you write a story, but Trump is still wrong about fraud. Yeah, we get it. But how about you inform the people of the real problems instead of just trying to run the orange man bad narrative all the time? Here's the story. Donald Trump says potential mail-in voter fraud. Here's the fact check. There is some voter fraud. One story is enough to shake people's confidence in the system. But more importantly, there are concerns about whether or not the system can handle the mail-in ballots. While I would say Trump maybe goes over the top by claiming there's going to be massive amount of counterfeit votes, the system is overwhelmed as it is. 5 days before they wrote that, they had this story. He could have said the system is overwhelmed. There will be problems. Trump may be right about that, but the fraud may be over the top, even though I think that'd still be wrong. Look, we had fraud in West Virginia. We had fraud in New Jersey. And that alone is enough. And if you go back in time, there's fraud every couple of years. You see these big stories. Acorn, for instance, that they don't exist anymore, but they were implicated in several voter registration fraud scandals. It happens, and it happens on large scales. Now, look, Steve Bannon, he says the GOP needs to drop it. Democrats own it. You got to drop it or face the blue tsunami. We may not agree with it, but we're going to have to fight that on another day, said Bannon. Well, it's going to be chaos, man. As ballots pile up in the mail, a potential nightmare looms on election night. So bravo, mainstream media. To all the people who said that everything was going to be fine, Trump was wrong, and mail-in ballots, they're just like absentee. We do it all the time. And now all of these outlets are writing today. Whoopsie, it's going to be chaos. What does ABC News say? The potential chaos could make Florida in 2000 look like a garden party. Well, we get the elections we deserve. Personally, I think it's fair to blame the Democrats. I know it sounds cliche. You turn on Tim Pool's channel and there he is saying the Democrats, so it's backfiring. But come on, man. Is this not the case? Am I wrong about this? Feel free to comment below and tell me I'm wrong. I get it. But the Democrats are the ones who are demanding this and the GOP wasn't. They were resisting and Steve Bannon just told them to stop. So when first-time voters, marginalized communities, and youth voters are the ones being disenfranchised, who is there to blame but the Democrats who have demanded this? In the meantime, what do we get? The RNC has registered more voters already than we did in the entire 2016 cycle. Gee, that sounds like really good news for Trump. Here we got a story from Bloomberg, if I can get it to open. Trump outpaces Biden in zeroing in on voters with Facebook tools. Oh, yeah, Trump is using the digital space way better than Biden is. Here we go. Zogby. Biden's dismal support from blacks threatens his election. Maybe that's why they want mail-in voting, because they know they're losing minority votes to Trump. I don't know. Doesn't seem to make sense. I think the black vote will overwhelmingly go towards Joe Biden, pointing out that, many of these people have their complaints with Donald Trump, but many of them actually have warmed up to him. These individuals have, they're polling in a certain direction. I'm sorry, man. It's going to backfire on Democrats. There's no other way to put it. There are some weird things going on. Texas is a swing state in 2020. I don't know how much that matters, but polling is all over the place. If you are going to have first-time voters disenfranchised, dare I say, a major benefit to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is going to be relying on his base. They voted for him in 2016. The Democrats are trying to get new voters who hate Donald Trump to vote. And if they don't know how to do it, and the people, first-time voters are the ones being disenfranchised, congratulations, Democrats. You've just owned yourself. I don't know what else to tell you, but I'm going to leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. at youtube.com/TimCastNews. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.